Discuss this more, we can turn to Rick Sterling, who is an investigative journalist and member of the Syria Solidarity Movement. Rick, this is an interesting situation to say the least. If the claims made by the Turkish foreign minister prove to be true, it's a remarkable change in Washington's stance. And do you think that the Kurds are getting a raw deal here? I mean, how would you comment on this political seesaw?
Well, the Kurds have been betrayed many times in the past, so I suspect that they will not be surprised by this, and they're probably have been making plans for some time that their patron, the United States, will abandon them. What may happen is they may recognize and they may start working much more closely with the Syrian government. Of course, they've never been fighting against the Syrian government forces. And I think what may happen here is that the YPG will align and make it very clear that they are not seeking a federation or anything like that, but they will be part of a future Syria.
Well, you mentioned the United States. This isn't their first time to leave them out to dry, if you will. We're going all the way back to the Wilson administration. But what about the timing of all of this? I mean, is Washington trying to win over Turkey here? I mean, Ankara has recently been drifting apart from the West, establishing itself as an independent regional power. What do you make of that timing?
Well, you're right that there's a lot of friction within the NATO alliance, and that Turkey has been at odds with Washington for years now, really. But the timing is being driven by Russia's role in seeking a solution and really making a lot of progress at resolving the conflict, bringing different parties together to the table. So the recent negotiation, including Iran and Turkey, with Moscow, the recent discussion, President Assad was in Sochi, Russia, meeting with Putin on Monday. The next day, Putin talked with President Trump. And then you had the negotiation between Russia, Iran, and Turkey, with upcoming all-Syria talks and negotiations. Just a couple of weeks ago, you had the King of Saudi Arabia going to Moscow for the first time. So there's a lot of optimistic things happening on the ground, and I think what's going on in Washington is that there is uncertainty how to handle the situation. There are forces in Washington that want to play a spoiler in this. They don't want to see a resolution to the conflict, and that's what's dangerous. So I think we have to hope that Washington will recognize that it basically needs to follow international law, and as the Syrian government has asked the U.S. to withdraw from Syria, that they are not there legally, the United States needs to do that.
So Erdogan, he's been showing up power for himself in the country, and he has always criticized Washington's support for the YPG fighters in Syria. So if the Americans really do yield to Ankara's demands, which force do you think could actually play the role of a new partner for Washington on the ground there? Let's assume that they don't withdraw.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's the $64,000 question. Just in recent days, there's been a lot of Turkish troops going into northern Syria, so it may be that Washington will align more closely with Turkish troops, which will refuse to leave Syria. Now, of course, the agreement is that all parties are supposed to be combating terrorism. The only thing consistent here between Washington and Ankara is inconsistency. It's just a couple of years ago that Turkey was a major supporter of ISIS, and Washington, of course, has played a dual role here. So we're going to have to see how it plays out. The betrayal of the Kurds is going to this overtly is going to leave a big stain on Washington. And of course, Erdogan is basically he's shown himself to be very adept at opportunistically advancing his interests however he can. It's not just by the way, it's not a war against the PKK in southern Turkey. It's a war against the Kurdish communities, and really a war against the whole progressive community within Turkey. because the Progressive People's Party, the HDP in Turkey, was not solely a Kurdish party. It was a party with Kurds within it, but it was really uniting a lot of the people of Turkey. And so the assault, the aggression in southern Turkey is not it's not just against the PKK.
The short version is that it is just a mess in its entirety. Rick Sterling, investigative journalist and member of the Syria Solidarity Movement. Certainly glad to hear your thoughts. It will be very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.